Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being there this evening. I, Architect Mildred Jose, extend a very warm welcome to all the participants in this webinar lecture series organized by the Center for History and Archaeology. We have had eminent speakers in the earlier sessions sharing with us their views on multiple interesting and diverse topics. As I move on with the introduction of the speaker for today, I would like to remind our audience that our chat box will be open 15 minutes before the session concludes. Kindly feel free to use the chat box for posting your queries. With that introductory note, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Ms. Disha Aluwalia. Miss Disha is an archaeologist who has worked at sites like Binjore, Barnawa, and Sanauli. She has done her bachelor's from University of Delhi and master's from University of Mysore. Post that, she did diploma in archaeology from Institute of Archaeology. She is currently pursuing PhD from the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. Her thesis title is Settlement Pattern of PGW using communities in Ghaggar Basin, Rajasthan. She has undertaken extensive exploration in this region and has excavated sites that has helped her study. With that description, I request your attention and help me welcome our speaker for the day, Disha ma'am, who will be enlightening us on the topic beyond painted greyware, culture and its nuances. Over to you, Ms. Disha ma'am. Please come on board.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for the technical errors and the delay that took place. First of all, I want to really thank Asiatic Society for Social Science Research and Center of History and Archaeology for extending an invitation and asking me to come aboard and share my study and share an important aspect of archaeology and history with all of you. The topic that I've chosen is very close to my heart and something that I've been working on for a long period of time. Since I didn't know how technical I could get, I decided to keep the topic very general. There will be a lot of generalization as well as my own work, which will come eventually. First of all, as the title suggests, Beyond Painted Greyware, I'm sure the viewers must be aware by now that I'll be talking about PGW, the painted greyware that we all know, and anyone who's read history or uh, understand archaeology is aware of PGW to an extent, because the way it has been treated so far in archaeological context. Beyond PGW, when I say, it always means that I'm trying to shift the focus away from this alluring, this intriguing pottery, which has grasped the attention of archaeologists for decades now. And I'll be talking about the things that we know, the things we don't know, and the things that we should be working on. So if there are any students out there who are looking to undertake research in archaeology or history and would like to work, so it'll be sort of, helpful for them and helpful for me in certain reasons. So I will begin my presentation. As I mentioned in the introduction, you know, we I can't move forward. Anyway, so as I mentioned in the introduction, I'll be talking about painted greyware and the cultural association. But before we start understanding the cultural association, before we start understanding what is the culture, right, in a very derogatory term, the term culture is used nowadays, but in true sense, in historical and archaeological sense, if we look at the culture, before that, we must understand what is painted greyware. I will not go into the detail and the depths of technical aspects of manufacturing PGW. However, it requires a whole lot of one entire session just dedicated to this. So I'll just sort of give an introduction to what is PGW. PGW is nothing but a soft clay pottery with a painted design, and its markers are fine fabric, firing, and finish. These are the three categories, three criteria, parameters just that set painted grey ware apart from any other grey ware. Now, grey ware, how do we get grey ware and how do we get a red pottery is a technical aspect. It all depends on how much oxygen is available in the kiln, oxidization and reduction. That's the two things. That's one of the things that is required for the changes in the color. And gray ware is one of those changes that happened in the kiln. So pyrotechnology is has is advanced at this point. That is the reason why it has a soft gray pottery. And in my experience as well, and I have seen few potters during my work, and I've seen it's very difficult to get an even toned gray ware, and the gray ware like PGW. This is one of the reasons why it stood out, because during Harappans and post PGW, or you look at Kushans or Gupta, all the way to medieval, you do get gray pottery, but the fabric varies, the firing varies, and its finish varies. So painted gray ware very interestingly stood out, and for a really long period of time, it was noted distinctively. Pre-independence, also, if any explorers report you'll read today, they will mention about fine gray pottery with painting. But it was only post-independence when it got its standing. And as rightly, Alchin and Alchin, they call it as hallmark of a culture. So the fine fabric, firing and finish together in a soft gray pottery and a paint design is what stands out. And this in turn started to represent a cultural milieu, a cultural strata, which today we know as painted grey ware culture. A humble ceramic type to a cultural marker. It is a very interesting journey of this pretty painted grey ware, and the journey sort of starts somewhere in post-independent India. It started with, of course, the excavation of Hastinapur, but it was for the first time reported at Ahichadra. It was reported in an archaeological report for the first time, but they were unable to identify it as a distinct ceramic culture or a distinct culture, which of course happened only with the excavation of Hastinapur. And till now, we have to give credit to Professor P.B. Lal for doing so and to be able to identify that as a separate strata. This is the excavation of Hastinapur, the picture, and this picture is sort of very interesting, and I really like this picture for many reasons. A, there is this bullock cart which is in middle of this pathway, and then you can see the trenches over here. The trench being taken horizontally through the mound, and looking at the sheer size of the mound itself is so interesting. So as I mentioned, that it was the credit goes to Professor B.B. Lal, but also to the conditions and the kind of environment that persisted post 1947. This was a time when, after independence, major sites, especially sites belonging to Harappan civilizations such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were now part of Pakistan, the newly formed independent country itself. And it was time that archaeological investigations in the country is sort of given a impetus by the government itself. So when in one side A. Ghosh and his iconic work in Rajputana, the exploration that he undertook with his teammates in 1950 to 52 was very important. On the other hand, it was work of Professor Lal, who explored Upper Ganga and Satluj Valley, and then eventually excavated Hastinapur in 1950 to 52. This is also very important, as the slide says, that it was a time, when you have an urban Harappan civilization, as it was earlier known as urban. Today we know it's much more diverse than one could imagine, but a civilization, and then you straight away have the evidence of Buddha and the evidence of Ashoka. So in back in 1940s and 50s, it was thought that India has a dark age, and sort of gave chance to many theories of invasions, which later converted to migration, to sort of seep in and come in. And it was one of the most baffling archaeological problems back then. And to target this and to keep taking this as one of the objectives, as Professor Lal himself admits in his report, that he undertook explorations, and that is when they started understanding the historicity of Mahabharata and then eventually Ramayana. And then that whole project, there were sites like Hastinapur, there were many sites like Barnava, Purana Kila, which were all come under the same ambit, and it was painted grey ware, which stood out in everything. So once we go into understanding the culture and the pottery and the tradition and the things that we know today, it's always important to understand what was the political and social understanding and ideology that was persisting at that point of time. Because at the end, it's humans. We are humans. Archaeologists are also humans. Our understanding changes with time. So it's very important to know what was the condition in 1940s to 1950s. I think I've already mentioned this, and I have spoken about this alongside with previous slide. But one thing I would like to mention here is that Hastinapur is still today is one of those index sites. It's a yardstick for cultural sequence of Ganga Plain. We excavate any site, you will eventually be going back to the report published by Professor Lal in Ancient India 10 and 11, no matter what, be it for ceramic analysis, be it for understanding how the excavation happened, and be it for anything. So it all started sort of with this particular objective and in this given environment. This is the cultural sequence of Hastinapur. It's very interesting for many reasons. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but I thought I should include a little bit of Hastinapur in between before dwelling into PGW. What is important here is that at the base, above the natural soil, there is a culture called OCP. And OCP itself was identified by Professor Lal again. He was the one who identified this culture, this particular pottery, and the culture associated with it along the time when he identified PGW and the culture associated with it. So there is OCP, and then he says there is a hiatus, which is break in between, followed by PGW. And then there is another again break followed by NBP, including the modern phase. Then again there is a break, and then you have Kushan, Shung, and then there is a long gap, and then again you have early medieval going till the late medieval. What is very interesting here are these breaks in between, and also you might see that I have not mentioned the dates for OCP and PGW because we'll be talking about this later. But this chronology sort of it's very unique. It stands true, and many a times it's sort of an indexed sequencing. However, there's an absence of Gupta phase, but of course Kushan continues for a long period of time till till the advent of Gupta period. These are few antiquities that I thought I should include because anyone can actually open and see the Hastinapur report. So I didn't think that was feasible for me to waste time. But what you need to see are these figurines, and this is painting, and this is plain grey-ware, and it's sort of one of those things which you find in a PGW site apart from other things. So when Professor Lal published his report in Ancient India, he made two revelations. One was, of course, that he identified PGW as a separate cultural identity. But what he did was he linked it to Mahabharata. And he also gave it a date from 11,000 to 800 BCE. And he said that it coincides with Aryan invasion, which of course later turned into Aryan migration. So he was very adamant in his belief and said that PGW is a product of Aryan migration, and it was supposedly brought in to the Ganga Yamuna Dwab and Ganga Plain via Saraswati, which is today Gagar Hakra Basin, and it came with Aryans. We will talk about this particular point again. So I'm just trying to give few pointers that we'll be discussing later in the presentation. So these two important aspects are these are very important, and these things stuck. Post 1952, and we sitting in 2020, we still consider these. We still talk about, the moment we talk about Purana Killa, we are always looking for PGW. Purana Killa was excavated multiple times because PGW was not retrieved from proper cultural context, and this is a reason why, because they were looking for PGW. But there are many things in the PGW realm that we know and we still don't know. What is interesting here is that the area that Professor Lal explored it coincides in time and space, so in space with Kuru Panchal region, as mentioned in Mahabharat. So he gave a very foolproof hypothesis, a foolproof theory on Mahabharata and PGW, and it still stands, right? Which is very interesting, because often at times theories are made, and then there'll be a counter theory, but none of us or anyone is successful in doing so. And the reason is because he used each points of PW, each points of Mahabharata, and linked it. But to what extent is one of the questions I often ask, because see, as I mentioned in the PPT, he took the floodplain, or the deposit, the break between OCP and PGW that I mentioned in the previous slide, uh, and again above PG and period 3, that he took as a flood deposit. He said between PGW and the early historic period, that is NPP period, the alluvial deposit is a flood deposit, and that is the great flood mentioned in the epic, which resulted in the shift to Koshambi. Okay, and then again, when Kushambi was subjected to scientific scrutiny at the base of below PGW, again there was alluvial deposit. And when I say alluvial deposit, it means flood deposit, or perhaps even sterile, any sort of deposit, but the sterile deposit. Okay. But the reason why I am mentioning beyond PGW is because there were parameters of him linking it to the epic of Mahabharat. But when Professor Lal was asked where, he was asked by one of the famous historians, William Dalrymple, for his book City of Jinns. When he was asked where are the palaces of Indraprastha, he said in poet's imagination. Very interestingly, he mentioned that, and his parameters to base epic and link epic and PGW was that at all the sites that he explored, which still resonates the legends of Mahabharata, still resonates somewhere or the other with the Mahabharata. In the lower level, or in lowermost, or the second phase, have had PGW as a deposit. That was his one of the parameters, important parameters. And in his early reports, he very humbly says that, what, my theory is circumstantial. I am doing a geographical study. I did explorations. I found PGW. And if tomorrow you start finding any manifestations of the epic in material culture or anything, my theory won't stand. But it had to happen at all the sites that are mentioned in Mahabharata, which is a very interesting point, and still today the theory stands. So he said that the culture that fills the Dark Age is PGW. So the key sort of lies with PGW. And as I mentioned earlier, he had linked it to PGW with RN. He tried to find similarities between the PGW and Iran, portraits from Iran. The points sort of were rejected by many archaeologists, including A. Ghosh, H.D. Sankalia. But it was Professor Lal himself now who has retrieved and withdrawn this statement. But unfortunately, in the books, in the college and school books, the earlier proposition still stands. Whereas Professor Lal now don't say this. He does link to Aaron, but his theory has sort of become more indigenous and homegrown, other than coming from outside. But as students and enthusiasts, it's important to know what was his parameters and what was he thinking. This is another picture from Hassanapur's excavation. Here is that alluvial deposit at the base. This is Ahichatra, the site where PGW was first reported but not recognized as a separate cultural identity or cultural marker. Now, when I say culture, culture is not what it means today for a general layman or onlooker. For archaeological and historical perspective, culture is some total of learned behavior, in my opinion. It's how we adapt to the given environment, given landscape, given resources, and we learn to live and we adapt to given situations, given scenarios. That is what forms culture. Okay, and in painted grey wares, in terms of PGW culture also, it is not all about the ceramic, the deluxe ware itself. It cannot be all about PGW. It has to be all the facets of social adaptation, religious manifestation, the divisions in society, the polity, everything that prevailed at that particular time. All that together is what forms culture. And PGW culture will be defined on the basis of those, and not with painted grey ware and its associations with the texts. So in this section, we will be looking at what we know and what we don't know. Now, one of the important, most fascinating thing about painted grey ware is its widespread. Okay, it's found it covers a large area from Rajasthan to Haryana to Uttar Pradesh. To westerns, it extends up to Bhavalpur, which is now in Pakistan. In Hakra, Ghaggar, when it crosses Pakistan, becomes Hakra, and Ghaggar is the paleo bed recognized as River Saraswati. Then you have easternmost sites actually as Vaishali, not Koshambi, but yeah, and the northernmost you have in Jammu and in Himachal area, and then you have southernmost in Kayatha in Madhya Pradesh. And these are a few important sites that I've mentioned. However, there are many sites, many sites. And the concentration is in Madhya Desha, that is area coinciding with Gangatic Doab, Ganga Yamuna Doab, and then the Gangatic Plains. That area sort of has a large amount of concentration of painted grey ware. This is a map which sort of tells you what was happening in the proposed chronology of PGW. If we look at from 1200 all the way to 500 BCE, this is the extent of painted grey ware. I don't know if the cursor is you can see, but the area which is highlighted, that entire area is PGW. And if you see it right from Ghaggar all the way to Ganga, it's spread over a large area, different geographical and ecological zones. And one would wonder, like when we look at Harappan civilization and look at it widespread, we talk in terms of regional characters today. We talk in terms of what are the regional indigenous characteristics that were there, like if a site, what material people were using at the site, they must be manufacturing something, but the product, must be coming from nearby sources. So all of that we understand in terms of in terms of Harappan civilization. today. We have so much of diversity. If we look at Gujarat itself, the Gujarat Harappan is very distinct. The Kutch Harappan pottery is so distinct. Once you come to, Ghaggar, Hakra, then you have that Hakra ware, which was recognized by Mughal in 1986. So there are so many regional characteristics. I often wonder what about PGW, right? What happens, because we know about one thing that is common. The common thread is PGW, but we don't know about the things that are micro, in the microcosm that are very important. We don't know the minute changes that happens, which are important, essential to know. And this map is also very interesting because it tells you the contemporary cultures. Here I've mentioned black slip below BRW because that was absent. And black slip is often present in that zone, very near to Kushambi and that area, and it precedes NPPW in many areas. So as I was talking about that, it's when we look at PGW, we look at any site, so we look at its association with Mahabharata, we often place a hell lot of a heavy concentration and attention to PGW. But how were the people living? And I will come back to this interview done by William Dalrymple again. He asked about where are the palaces, and Professor Lal said in Poet's Imagination. And he also said that the people, he mentioned that they were humble. Their living was very humble. They were not living in an extravagant life, which to me is a well statement, because that's what we know so far. But what's next? As I've already mentioned that, PGW is more or less an agro-pastoral society. It's an agriculture-based society. The material for architecture, we usually find mud bricks, mud lumps, and they have wattle and daub structures. Many times we found embankments, moats, enclosure walls. But apart from that, in terms of houses, we could only retrieve wattle and daub structures of some platforms, ramp floors which are of good quality. There is a community hearth, storage bin, raised platform that have been found from Mathura and Chakera, Bhagwanpura and Jakera. At Jakera, there is one house with 23 post holes around it, which was exposed during excavation. And their skill was, of course, apart from pottery, was metallurgy, and they were manufacturing glass. The evidences of burial are found only from Bhagwanpur and Abhayapur. Abhayapur is one of the very interesting sites because of the burials, because of the PGW burials that have come to light from the excavation of Abhayapur. Plants from mud plaster. When I'm talking about mud plaster, this practice is still in vogue today. We still have, if you go to rural areas, you still find houses which are plastered with mud. And if you observe anyone, the people who are living there, if you observe how they're preparing the clay for plastering, you'll see that they do use husk. They use a lot of plant remains dried up, and then they, along with cow dung, and then they make the plaster. So in case of PGW sites, we do find these lumps with husk impressions, and often at times there is always charred grain, embedded in it. Plasters, wall plasters, which sort of suggests that, of course, they were living in a mud or a mud brick structures or mud lump structures which are plastered, or huts. I would like to believe that sort of very similar to what we find in Ghaggar, Hakra today. Even today in those regions, people still live in mud houses in many places actually, and even in Harappan context, we do find mud bricks, especially in Ghaggar, Hakra. So in PGW context also, there is large use of mud bricks instead of baked bricks, although few instances of baked bricks have been found. So they were cultivating wheat, barley along with rice. Of course, they were consuming meat. And apart from, as I mentioned earlier, PGW, they were skilled in metallurgy and they were producing glass. Atranchikera has a very good example of glass manufacturing, and Atranchikera glass has a separate identity in the whole PGW culture milieu. So when we talk about how the people lived, often try to understand, and I will go to Harappan studies. Why? Because we have so much of data pre-PGW from Harappan civilization. So I'll go back to that to have a sort of parallel. In Harappan also we know that there were rural sites, smaller sites, bigger sites, and we understand that there were distinct characters. And in order to do that with PGW, the first step is to find the distribution of site, the pattern of the settlement, or we call settlement archaeology or landscape archaeology in the West. So one of the important works done in that respect, like to understand how the sites are distributed in a zone, in an ecological zone, in a geographical zone, or along the riverbed, how far sites are distributed, what are the distance. So that is what happens in settlement pattern studies. And one of the work done by is Makhanlal in Kanpur district in 1984. In his survey, he revealed that there are 40 sites which are less than 2 hectares in size, whereas there were 2 sites which are, the sizes are from 2 to 2.99 hectares, and there were 3 sites which are from 3 to 3.99 hectares. Okay. Another study done in Koshangi is also important. We sort of deduce the same, which talks similar thing. Jim Schoffer's and Suraj Ban's work in Haryana is also very important, and they also sort of give similar data. Another important study was done by Mughal and Bhagalpur. Why it's important is because it tells you the westernmost extent of PGW. There is only to an extent in the Hakra belt that PGW is spread, and it has not gone, the continuation is not there, and he was only able to retrieve 14 PGW sites, and one of the biggest PGW sites is in that region. It's in Cholistan, which is 13.7 hectares in size, which is a must be beautiful site. We wish to go there one day, of course. The reason why, I discussed about these work is because on the basis of these work, scholars deduce that PGW people were living in sort of a 3-tier settlement. Now, 3-tier settlement is what you see at Harappan sites, where in Dholavira, for instance, there is a citadel, there is a middle town, and then there is a lower town. Okay, that is a 3-tier settlement. That's the similar sort of, in a similar category was placed, the PGW settlements, and the reason why they said that, along with that, they also say that there must be some sort of hierarchy, because there are big sites surrounded by small sites, and then smaller than that. So there is a variation in size. So there could be a large community, a close-knit community, and people who are living in sort of hierarchical system. There must be a political system in place, and there must be some distinction. And of course, as we all know, and if those who don't know, I'll also tell you that PGW is also linked to later Vedic period, later Vedic age. Okay, and when you talk about how you retrieve information, in the absence of archaeological data, many scholars have gone to literature, especially Vedas, to deduce information. But the point, and as it's highlighted in red, is that unless and until we don't have architectural remains, we don't have concrete proofs, and we don't have critical evaluation of the situation, it's we can't say anything. And these things are very important to strengthen such hypotheses. One region and one locale, and the study needs to be compiled and see if there are any variation or if it matches or no. And walking on the similar lines, I have picked up the work in Ghaggar Valley for my research. And this is the map that I have created. It's published. And this is just one district of Ghaggar Basin, very closer to Pakistan and India's international border. And the sites in blue are the PGW sites along with Harappan sites. And, I have only generated, I have created a map only for few sites, but there is, I can say one thing, that there is some similarity with the work that has been done. But what I'm keen to know and to see in as I go forward with my study is that did it affect, did the drying up of river Saraswati really affected the settlement or not? Because that played a very important role in Harappan context. Although there is no relation of Harappan and PGW in this area, as we see in other sites like Bhagwanpura, where there is an overlap. In this area, there is a stark distinction. PGW people never occupied Harappan mounds. They always they tried to, they broke new grounds, and their settlements were always on a virgin land. And so it will be very interesting to see, because with Harappan, we do see a lot of changes happening. So this is the map that has been created on the base of my preliminary work. And this particular site, which has a satellite image here, is the one that one of the sites that we excavated, me and Dr. Manjul from Archaeological Survey of India. We have excavated this site while we were excavating Binjor in the same region. This is the mound. It doesn't look that raised, but it was. The picture is from a different angle. So excavation, it was a small excavation because we were doing it as a trial excavation, but it revealed a lot of important and interesting evidences. There are evidences of earth or storage bins. There are post holes that have been identified in a small area. We excavated hardly 5 meter by 5 meter. This is a hearth that we excavated during excavation. Is from the topmost level. This is the first floor that we excavated, and there has been a lot of destruction because there is modern activity on this site, but there is a lot of burning. The layer is very ashy, and we have 4 structural phases at this site. This is the second structural phase, and the white powder is gypsum. So they perhaps they've been layers and layers. They were plastering the floors during this period. And this is another floor level with post holes, and this is you can see it's right below where the plastering layer ends. And this floor was really well made. Like you can see it's ramped. It doesn't have much potsherds, but it's clay, and it was solid floor. It took a really long time for us to even excavate and go down, and it was well prepared floor. So I reckon must be I'm amazed, because when we were excavating Barnawa, unfortunately we could not get such evidences. Here in a single cultural PGW site, getting such evidences is very interesting. And you can see in the section as well that it's solid clay. It's amazing, and it was very, very hard to excavate and go down. This is a section, and we took a 5 by 5 meter trench, but because of time constraint, we had to cut it down and take a vertical section. And there are 6 layers, and we have dated the site as well. So here are a few antiquities in PGW that we have found. These are very common antiquities that we find in PGW context. We always find pottery disc. They take the base of the pottery and they always perforate it, to use it as a hopscotch or for some purpose, we don't know. But the pottery discs are very common in PGW, as opposed to in an urban context, you get proper terracotta hopscotch. They don't reuse the pottery in a Harappan context, and they usually don't perforate. But here they are doing it. Having said that, you also find the proper terracotta discs also. The beads are also again the marker of PGW. This question is asked many times in many papers. These are the cut beads. Bone tools are also very important to PGW users. The community that were using PGW. So bone tools are again found at many PGW sites. And the earliest date that we have, AMS date that we got from the site is 976 BCE, which sort of go hand in hand with the excavation, the dates from Chuck 86, done by Archaeological Survey of India in 2009. But they go and take a bracket of 1100. However, their scientific dates are also somewhere from 1000 to 900 and not 1100. So this is sort of a broader chronology, and the top level, the date was around 200 and around 300 BCE. So it sort of goes for a longer period, the PGW culture here. So I'll go back to the initial topic, and the reason why I picked up this is it time to focus beyond PGW? And the answer is of course yes. As I have mentioned in previous sites, we know very little about the regional diversity of PGW as it spread over a larger area, and it continued for a longer period of time. I think there must have been some regional adaptations or some regional traits that must have been picked up. And even if there are no regional traits, it's a subject of study. Why is that not happening? Was there a uniformity that was well maintained in the whole PGW milieu? Were they using the similar pottery types, or similar shapes, similar antiquities all throughout this the realm of PGW, which is also an interesting question to ask, and one would love to find an answer as to whether or not there is a regional variation and not. The both are very interesting. And as my work heavily relies on ceramic, and I'm working on the ceramic association, beyond PGW also. So the second point I would like to make is that we are not able to understand plain graveware in association with PGW. As I mentioned somewhere in the beginning of the slides, PGW graveware exists in Harappan. It exists in PGW cultural context. Post PGW, it's going with BSW, which is contemporary to PGW as we know now. And it is going to NBT, which is also contemporary to PGW that we know now. And it is going it has a longer chronology. The only thing that changes are the fabric and the shapes. So how far is the relationship from PGW to Andreware is? Because if we read Chakera's report, they say there is a proto-PGW level, and they say that they find plain PGW, plain graveware. So is there any association? Painting comes later, and then in the last phases, does the painting disappears? This is one of the questions that is still unanswered. Another is, of course, I said, its interaction with its contemporary cultures is very unclear. We now know that PGW was not in isolation, as Harappans were not living in isolation. They were, contemporary Chalcolithic cultures that were in around Harappan boundaries. So was the case with PGW. PGW was not living in isolation. BSW, which precedes NPW, the date is early. Then you have BRW. So even OCP's date is from 2600 and goes all the way to 1200 BCE. So even OCP sort of overlaps or predates PGW somewhere or the other. So what is happening with redware, and this topic is still moot. We don't know much. Linking to Aryan in today's conditions and the data that we have today, we don't know the proper if the scholars, the school of thought that says that PGW is linked to Aryans and it has come from outside. I would really love to know what is the root of diffusion and distribution. Or if it's inward internal movement, what is the root of distribution and diffusion? The answer will lie in the ceramics and the cultural material and its in-depth analysis. Because the reason why I think we don't know this part is because you read literature and you would know that for a long period of time, until today, people think that the migratory route and the migratory track used by the PGW users to come to the Ganga Valley was this Ghaggar Hakra basin. But when you don't get sites beyond a certain extent in Cholistan, uh, it's sort of the matter becomes more difficult to understand because you don't have a track then to follow. In the absence of dates from Ghaggar Basin, Ghaggar Hakra Basin, we can't actually say. But today, from the excavations that we did and from Chakki D6, the dates are sort of contemporary to Hastinapur's date. So how was this diffusion happening? Like, what was the date? Because if you look at the Abhaypur's date, Abhaypur sort of dates very early. The date is sort of 1700 to 1400 bracket. Early date, very early date. There are many sites which are giving today early date. But if you look at Bhagwanpura, where there is an overlap, the date is 1300 BC. So my question now is what was exactly happening because of the new data that is coming in? Are we still going to be focusing on just the old concepts, or are we going to move forward? And it's very interesting. If you read any literature, you will find few points and few characteristics of few things that have been retrieved from excavation. And then there will always be a line followed that, further excavation can only prove whether this is right or wrong. Further excavation can only help us understanding more. So it sort of makes me feel that it's time that we focus beyond PGW and start looking at more on its various cultural facets which are not known. And I've quoted here Professor Tripathi's words, and she does say this somewhere that limited excavations of PGW horizons and the details of many facets in a proper cultural context are very hardly been retrieved. And whatever we deduce, whatever reconstruction we do is tentative and more in the nature of an overview. So I feel that it's been many decades, and it's time that we don't look at the overview, but we look at a broader picture, holistic understanding of the culture. These are the few questions that still need to be answered, and I have already mentioned about Saraswati and what was happening in Ghaggar, and also if the river Saraswati was receding around 2000 to 900 BCE, then if the migration was the same track, what was the irrigation of these residents? There are certain questions that are always, I ask, and I hope that together, we are able to understand more about it. And to conclude, I would like to just conclude with this quote by D.P. Agarwal, who he said this thing in a conference that happened on PGW in 1986 by Aligarh University. When Ashik Gaur was in that university, and that was the only conference that happened solely on PGW. And it's so interesting because in that conference, in that seminar, scholars actually spoke about various facets and they discussed, and that's the only time that thing happened, and afterwards it's just never happened. And just few works here and there. And he says the fear of new discovery should not come in a way of reconstruction of the past. New data will always force revision. That is the way of all research. So thank you. That's it. Thank you so much for listening. And if anyone has any questions, please ask.
Hello, good evening, everyone. This is Mohan Rawat, Director Documentation Photography and Archives, CHA. And thank you so much, Ms. Jita Aluwalia, for this wonderful lecture. It was really a wonderful lecture and topic that can definitely take for further research. Now, I would like our audience, if they have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat box. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Seema J, and she has asked, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes, so we have a question from Seema J, and she has asked that, was the PCW before Harappan?
No,
PGW.
no. See, the distribution of PGW, the existence of PGW and Harappan, in only the areas of Haryana and Punjab that you find an overlap between PGW and late Harappan, okay, not Harappan. But in the Ghaggar Basin, there was no interaction, and outside Haryana, Punjab, there is no interaction. So PGW comes always after the mature Harappan phase, and late also, when the late Harappan is sort of ending, that sort of phase. What is interesting with the overlap is that we still need to understand to what extent is the overlap. If we can distinguish between the ceramic, many big scholars say that it is Haryana and Punjab where the origin of PGW happened, and thereon it distributed. So I will go again with that thing. But in larger area, no, PGW it never comes before, it is always after. However, OCP, the first culture which was in that slide that I showed from Hastinapur, that is contemporary to Harappan. That the Sonali chariots and OCP, they are contemporary to Harappan. The date is 2600 for both.
Thank you so much. And we have another question from FA. Any timeline regarding Ramayana sites?
Sorry?
Any timeline regarding Ramayana sites? He or she is asking about the Ramayana sites timeline.
Ramayana.
See,
Ramayana, if you read Ayodhya's excavation report, the initial one, also the one by B.D. Lal, he gives a very strong chronology. The earliest strata he says is NBPW, but I don't know what Dr. Mani's excavations earliest strata is. My thinking is in that zone VSW, which is preceding NBP culture, should exist there. Before NBP, which is Northern Black Polish ware, always linked to Buddhism and the rise of Mahajanpada in the east. So that before that, in that zone, there is a pottery called Black Slip Ware, which has a continuation. So Black Slip exists. So the earliest is NBPW, and then the same chronology. They have the Kushans and Guptas, and then Pratiharas and all that. So the timeline is sort of available for Ramayana. Ramayana, I would not say the epic, because the study again was done by Professor Lal, but I am more interested in the site as alone, not in the epic connection, but rather in Ayodhya as an archaeological site, because it's an interesting archaeological site.
Thank you. We have one more question from Riddhi. Good evening, ma'am. Are there any material markers, indicators that might suggest that PGW of the western extent may predate or be earlier than that of its eastern extent?
That might suggest that PGW of western extent might predate earlier. See, no, that's what my work is. I have excavated a site which is right in the westernmost extent of PGW, very close to the border of India and Pakistan, very close to Bhagalpur. And the dates are very late, like they are after 1000 BCE. So they are not predating. So the whole concept, the reason why why the early scholars said that the PGW, the western zone, the Ghaggar Hakra is early, they looked at the pottery and they said कि PGW, not the red ware, not associated ware, but the PGW जो है, उसका जो pottery it's very crude. The fabric is not as fine as the Ganga, so ये early है. But if you look at what happens in late Harappan context, the pottery becomes crude in the late also. In early Harappan context, the pottery is not cruder to late में वो भी हो सकता है. So the dates that we have got, and we got that from two sides, and the work that we are doing and the kind of redware, the associated material we are getting, nowhere does it seems that the western extent is earlier than the eastern extent. However, it sort of could be the other way around.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking up these questions and answering them in detail. And I would also like to thank all our participants, audience, for taking interest and showing so much. Uh, and thank you so much, Ms. Disha Ahluwalia. Now, I would like to see. So, CHA had a wonderful lecture for past 2 months, and I would request our chief executive to give her concluding remarks. Over to you, Surbhi ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It has been a great selection.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello, Surbhi ma'am.
Yes,
Good evening, ma'am.
very good evening. Thank you all. And am I audible?
Yes, yes, ma'am. You.
Madam Disha, it's a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
And layman, I think you spoke so nicely that a layman could understand what is going on in this forum.
And that
It is
was
a lovely experience.
Thank you. Thank you so
Very
much.
nice experience, and many questions arouse almost the dark age, what Mr. Lal is thinking and how Mr. Ghosh has contradicted. So there is a lot of things you told in a very small span, but it is a big chapter, I think.
Very big chapter. Yes.
Very big chapter. And you told so nicely in a so precise form.
Thank you so
That
much.
is a great experience. And now today I am concluding that we had already 4 webinar, I think, Mr. Mohan, am I right? It is 6, yes. And each and one, whatever we took it, megalithic period to the coins, to the chapters are so many. I missed the all are wonderful, and I concluded that we should start another chapter again.
Yes.
The same gesture. And Madam Mildred, you always spoke so nicely. Thanks to you and all the chapter. So I am thanking Madam Disha, and we will wait for next chapter again.
Yes, sure.
And Madam Disha, I wish to talk more with you. When you will get time, you come again, and we have to know more elaborating form.
Yes, I would love to discuss. It would be my pleasure to discuss in detail. It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much for
Thank you all of you. I'm concluding with this.
So much,
thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, both of you, Surbhi ma'am and Disha ma'am. And before we conclude for the day, I would request all our audience to please feel free to fill the feedback form provided in the chat box. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.